How's it going, Illini Nation? Yes, this is the Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network. And is that what I hear correctly, Sonny? Is that the CBS NCAA men's basketball tournament music way off in the distance? But at least we can start to hear it right now because the season is beginning tomorrow, and we are going to preview all things Illini basketball today. We're going to ignore that Illinois Minnesota football loss. It's all about Illini basketball right now. Sonny, how's it going?
It's going okay. I know you said we're going to ignore Illini football. I wish we could ignore football in its entirety because my professional team got embarrassed as well today. So it must be nice to be able to wear your team's jersey and not feel ashamed by it. But that's why I'm focused clearly on basketball from this point on. Just a heads up, I know this whole setup looks weird for those of you guys watching this on YouTube. I am fixing my office area, and so I'm revamping everything in here. The lighting is just not set up properly. So I apologize, but it should be ready to go in about a week or so.
Well, you're lucky that Kirkland and Alex aren't on to roast your background. So that's a good thing, those Armchair Illini guys. Make sure to follow them on Twitter and get all of your latest written Illini news from Armchair Illini. But we are here. Illini Cast will be here all season long to go over the highs and go over the lows of Illini basketball. There's going to be a mixture of both, I'm sure, with a roster that is so mixed matched right now that we don't know really what to expect with this Illini basketball roster. Yet we do know that Tomislav Ivisic will be in Illini. He's considered a sophomore, had to pay a fine to a charity, essentially. But the important part, like Brad Underwood said, is he is on the roster. So, Sonny, what are your initial impressions of this Illini roster? A lot of new pieces going in, some returning players that didn't have the biggest scoring roles. But what are your initial thoughts on this roster?
Extremely talented. I really like the roster up and down. Unfortunately, we're not very heavy when it comes to experience, and you kind of saw that in the exhibition match against Ole Miss. But I think the ceiling of this team is as high as it's been in a very, very long time. The talent in that room is, as high as it's been in a very, very long time. I think it's going to be a struggle early in the year, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that, later on in this episode. But it's nice just, being at the point now where, we're trying to figure out which 4-star talent is playing, as opposed to begging for the 4-star talent to commit to us. So, I'm going to stay positive, and I'm looking forward to this basketball season.
Yeah, Illinois received votes, I believe, in the first AP poll in the preseason. This isn't a team that's going to get a lot of preseason recognition with all the talent that Illinois lost, including Marcus Damask and Terrence Shannon Jr., and even more so like Coleman Hawkins going to the transfer portal. A lot of places online you'll see there's a lot of misguided opinions on why Coleman Hawkins left. But the roster you have in front of us is a talented roster with Kasparis and Will Riley and Tomislav Ivisic. And you look at those freshmen or sophomores in terms of Tomislav's case, but new players in the fold. And I really think this Illini team just needs to gel together. And that brings me to the schedule that you have with you have some good warm-up games with EIU, SIUE, and then Oakland. And then you take on the number 2 team in the country, Alabama. That will be in Birmingham, Alabama. So I think a lot of this is going to be utilizing those games before your big tests as your way of seeing what lineups work, seeing what gels together well. This is going to be one of Brad Underwood's biggest challenges as a coach. But at the same time, this could be one of his biggest successes depending on the end result of this at least Big Ten season.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the year, I don't want to jinx it right off the bat, but with the expectations so low, this could be the year that he wins Coach of the Year. I mean,
it would be about time.
Yeah, I mean, he's easily been a top 2, if not, well, okay, I'll just settle a top 2 coach in the Big Ten Conference for, the past 4 or 5 years now at this point. But unfortunately, just because, he's so good at his job, the fact that we do routinely finish in the top 2 or top 3, he hasn't been, celebrated the way I think he should have been. This year, the expectations aren't there. I think the Big Ten media day we were projected fourth, something along those lines. Obviously we're coming into the season unranked, and I do think with the narrative around the Illini this year is about how young we are, and if he does do a fantastic job, if we contend for the Big Ten Conference Championship, I think he can finally get that piece of hardware, which he'll probably never claim that he wants, but we as Illini fans know that he deserves.
Absolutely. I mean, Brad Underwood has had Kofi Coburn and Ayo Dosunmu and Terrence Shannon Jr., and that makes it very difficult to win one of those Coach of the Year awards, especially when you had a year like Wisconsin had a few years back where they had no preseason, all Big Ten players, and they still won the conference. And I think those kind of situations lends itself better to winning Coach of the Year. This year, with all the new pieces that have to gel together, my goodness, if Illinois is successful, if Illinois at least gets a double bye in this Big Ten, this expanded Big Ten with great Osabar of Washington coming into the conference, Oregon coming in, UCLA with their top talent. This is a different Big Ten, and if Brad Underwood can gel this group together, that's the big time thesis of this season. Is gelling together. And if Brad Underwood can do that, he is this Coach of the Year, and I don't see any way around it.
Again, I hope we're right, but it's just one of those where if Indiana goes off, plays as well as their talent, dictates that they can play. I think they got the highest ceiling in the conference. You just wonder if Indiana is such a popular program that Mike Woodson all of a sudden steals it from Brad Underwood, which again I think is hilarious because Greg Gard has 2 Coach of the Year awards. You have Juwan Howard, who's gotten a Coach of the Year award, and potentially a Mike Woodson to get a Coach of the Year award. 3 guys who aren't even remotely in the same league when it comes to being the head of a program like Brad Underwood. But like I said, right now it's about getting rid of the negativity of football in my life and being positive about the basketball season. So I like the idea. Let's go ahead and get started and make our predictions, I guess you could say.
Yes. Who do you think leads this team in scoring? Let's start out with that one.
I mean, I think there's an easier answer here. So I'll just start off with the easy one. Right? This is kind of, I'll get it out of the way. Kasparas Jakushonis. My biggest question this year, and I'm kind of curious on your thoughts, Austin, is kind of similar to last year's, right? Last year's team, I liked last year's team, but I was like, I know we have the dog in Terrence Shannon Jr. I just don't know who that second guy is. Who's going to be the Robin? Of course, we saw Marcus Domask emerge not only as Robin, but arguably almost as Shannon's equal. This year, I feel like we're kind of in a similar boat. Everything we've heard about Kasparas is he's going to be a star. But right now, I just don't know who that second guy is going to be. Who is going to be that? Is it going to be Will Riley? Is he going to have the freshman year that a lot of us want him to have? Is it a guy like Kylan Boswell, coming home in his 3rd year of college basketball? He's played at that high level before. I don't know. So I feel like I have to go with Kasparas here when it comes to predicting the highest point scorer because I don't know who that second guy is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, Kasparas would be the easy answer, but if a guy like Trey White can really cement himself by doing the small things, we've seen that in practice reports from different basketball reporters out there on the scene that Trey White has had an unbelievable preseason. And if he is able to catapult some of those young guys just due to the fact of his experience in college basketball, that maybe he can be the leading scorer of this team. It might not showcase itself early on in this season, but if you're looking at a Big Ten grinder that you just need some points, you need toughness, you need tenacity, and if Trey White has delivered that in the off season, I think that this could be a situation where Trey White could actually lead this team in scoring. So that's my wild card answer in this question, just because of his college basketball experience. Not a lot of guys on this team have that, and you bring Trey White in, who's played in multiple conferences in college basketball. I think he's a guy that could utilize the ball a lot more than we initially anticipate.
Now I feel bad for cheating and taking the easy answer, so I'll provide a wild card to answer as well. But it kind of piggybacks behind your reasoning. And Jason, a good program mentioned his name. Ben Hummerkaus, I think, has that experience. Obviously he didn't have a great exhibition matchup, but Brad Underwood has been talking all offseason long about how good of a shooter Ben really is. And quite honestly, unlike last year's team where Terrence Shannon Jr. and Domask, both average 18 plus points per game this year, I genuinely think that the leading scorer on this year's team might just average 14, 15 points a game just because of the amount of depth on this basketball team. And the fact is, I don't know who the top 8 are going to be, which is what I'm looking forward to Monday night's matchup in seeing. So, if you're just talking about 13, 14 points a game, I think Ben Hummerkaus alone can make, 3 3-pointers a game if he's that good of a shooter. And then all of a sudden, again, he wouldn't be my favorite to lead the team in scoring, but I think, if we're tossing out wild cards, Ben's name's got to be involved.
And it makes Brad Underwood's job a lot easier to put Ben Hummerkaus in a lineup, especially if Tomislav Ivicic is in there, just because he is a low block kind of defender. And now that allows Ben Hummerkaus to go out and expand his range a little bit offensively. And defensively, it's not so much of a crutch because you do have a 7'1" guy in the front court. So I think having Tomislav eligible will help Ben Hummerkaus be on the court a little bit more.
And let me add, if Tomislav and Ben Hummerkaus are starting front court, that's going to lead to more opponents' points, which means we're going to have to score more points ourselves. So, another feather in the cap of Ben possibly leading the team in scoring.
I think there's an easy answer on who the assist leader is. So who will be our second place in assists?
See, I don't think it's that easy. For me,
Really?
I think it's 2 guys. I think it's 2 guys. I think it's easy, but I'm saying it would be harder for me to figure out who the third guy is as opposed to the first 2. Like, to me, let me know if you think I'm wrong. It's either Kasparis or Kylan. Do you think it's Kasparis?
No, I think it's Kylan as your assist leader. Easily.
See, that's funny because I actually think it's going to be Kasparis. I think, in my opinion, again, if you don't mind, I'll just go first on this one again.
Yeah.
I think the offense is going to run through Kasparis, and I think there's going to be a lot of 13, 7, and 6 stat lines for Kasparis this year. Whether his scoring is up there or not, we'll see. But I just think the offense is going to run through Kasparis. I think Kylan's going to be counted on more so for a defensive role or a guy who just has to play a little bit off the ball. Whether that's ideal for his skill set, I don't know. But I've seen enough of Kasparis where I know that the coaching staff is going to want the ball in his hands as often as possible. So I actually see Kasparis as the number 1 guy when it comes to assists, Kylan as number 2.
Yeah, I think Kylan's number 1 just because last year he only attempted 8.8 field goals per game, and yet he had 3.6 assists for that Arizona Wildcat team. So that's why I think that he's going to be more of an initiator on this offense as opposed to a true scorer. I know there's going to be opportunities where he drives to the hole and maybe that 3-point shot improves from last year, so maybe he's a little more comfortable shooting the ball. But I just truly think that Kylan is going to be the straw that stirs this drink of this Illini basketball team. He is the veteran presence on this roster. He is a guy that can get Kasparis and get Tomislav and get Will Riley all in position to do what they do best. And I think that's where Kylan is going to be best in. Who do you think leads the team in rebounds, Sonny?
Rebounding is interesting. And I think I'm going to go with, you go first on this one because I don't think we're going to have the same answer on this one.
I think it's going to be Tomislav. I think he is just down low. I think there's going to be some offensive rebound capabilities there. And then defensively, I think he's going to scare some people a little bit inside just so they don't want to go up against a 7'1" guy. So I think there's going to be some mid-range jumpers missed. So I think there's an opportunity for Tomislav to clean up on the board.
So, yeah, I figured, you might have gone with Tomislav. I actually think, and this is, probably the more aggressive take, is I think it could be Morez Johnson. I just think when it comes to the center position, Tomislav and Morez will probably have like a 60-40 split when it comes to divvying up the minutes at that center spot. And all Morez Johnson does is rebound wherever he goes, whether he plays in high school, whether he plays, in the FIBA under 18s, when Morez is on the court, he collects rebounds. And so I can absolutely see a scenario out there where, I mean, if you look at Tomislav's European numbers, for a guy his size, they're not exactly jumping out at you as a rebounder. So I do think like there's going to be certain lineups, smaller lineups, that Brad Underwood's going to be utilizing Morez Johnson a little bit more, and just through sheer will and hustle, I think Morez has a chance to lead this team in rebounding.
What non-conference game are you most excited about?
For me, I think it's Arkansas. I just love all the other storylines off the court that go along with it. You talk about Calipari, Underwood. You talk about the brothers playing against each other, and then you also have just the whole Orlando Antigua, and basically just leaving Calipari to come back to Underwood. I think that's the game, at least in the out of conference, that I'm looking most forward to.
Yeah, I'm going with Duke in February because I really feel like we'll know who this Illini team is, because there's not going to be many opportunities left after Duke to be like, oh, this is who Illinois is. I don't think this will be like an Illinois basketball season where you had Matthew Meyer and that kind of team. I think this team will gel a little bit quicker, just because Brad Underwood knows what to expect with these transfers and these new players coming in. He's going to define those roles quicker than what happened with the just island of misfit toys that was a few seasons ago. I think Duke will be exciting just because it's a change of pace, because you have Wisconsin and Iowa in between those games, and you're like, all right, throw the ball out, number 7 team in the country, Duke, with the number 1 probably draft prospect in Cooper Flagg there too. So that's going to be rather exciting to see how the Illini deal with that change of play of the rough and tumble Big Ten to something a little bit faster paced in the ACC. I think that's going to be exciting to see, and I think that it's just going to give Illini fans just a easy test to see, all right, what is this team going to look like in the NCAA tournament?
And you're talking about a game that's going to have like 4 or 5 potential lottery picks playing, combined between the two, especially if, Kasparis and Will Riley have the years that, we're kind of hoping to see. But yeah, I mean, that's a great answer as well. You're talking about Madison Square Garden, the mecca of basketball. If who knows, like we know Cooper Flagg is getting all the attention for the most part this year, but if Kasparis plays the way that a lot of us are hoping that he can play, it could be a battle of the 2 best freshmen in the country at that point. And it's like you said, it's going to be kind of a test to see how ready this super young team is going to be for what's to come just a couple weeks after, because that's when the pressure is on, the lights are bright. You're going to be playing really good basketball teams, and the crowd is going to be in it. You just know. So yeah, Duke and Illinois is going to be a fantastic matchup.
Right, like if Illinois played UConn in that same February date last year, I think a lot of Illini fans would be like, all right, maybe we're not winning the national title. Like, I think it would be a good barometer for Illini fans. They'd be like, okay, we're still a really good team, but there is another tier to this. So I'm excited to see where Illinois falls on that tier list at late February. But I think an underrated stretch is November 28th. That begins with that Arkansas game that you referenced, Sonny. Then you go Northwestern, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Missouri, all back to back to back. And I think that's going to be the streak that kind of defines where Illinois is seeding-wise. I know you have a full Big Ten slate after that, but that is a daunting stretch without any just bye games or cupcakes in there. It's going to be put up or shut up time consistently for those players to get playing time in the Big Ten play, and for Brad Underwood to see, all right, what are we? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? You're going to figure that out in that stretch.
Yeah, I was on maybe 2 weeks ago a show with Cody Del Mendo on his YouTube channel. He covers the Cubs for CHGO, but he also does Illini shows during the off season. And we were kind of going through the schedule, and I mean, that on a conference schedule is daunting, man. I mean, like you said, that's going to be really, really tough. But I think it's going to prepare the kids for Big Ten season, whereas opposed to Mike Woodson, who I brought up a couple times already this episode, and Indiana have a complete cakewalk through the out of conference schedule. So it's going to be interesting to watch the dynamics of the two, because Indiana's going to play their first Big Ten game, and they're going to feel what it feels like to be punched in the face. Whereas Illinois at that point will have already gone several rounds of physical matchups against really talented teams in really pressure filled scenarios. But I get what Brad's doing. I've talked about this before. I don't think Brad is interested necessarily in winning, Big Ten conference titles anymore, or Big Ten tournament titles. Of course, he would appreciate them, but I don't think that's his end goal anymore. I think now he got a taste of the Elite Eight last year, and he knows that the ultimate goal is the national championship. He's rebuilt this program to the point where, hey, first we just didn't want to play on Wednesdays in the Big Ten tournament. Right? We didn't want to play in that first round. And then we got past that. Then it's like, hey, let's contend for this Big Ten tournament. And then the Big Ten tournament got to, let's win a conference. Well, he's done all this stuff now, And then it was like, hey, let's get to the Sweet 16. Well, we did that last year, and we went beyond the Sweet 16. We made it to the Elite Eight. But then, you saw him talk about it in the offseason. Like, he saw what a national championship true contender looks like when he ran up against UConn last year. And he basically overhauled the entire roster. There's a lot of players on last year's team who, were expected to be on this year's team, but they were good college basketball players. But Brad's kind of realized that you need NBA talent on your team. And that's kind of what he's brought to Champaign this season. And I think, that's basically the ultimate goal of, Brad and the program in general.
All right, let's talk a little bit about conference play here. Let's start with this one. I asked Kirkland this, and I thought he gave an interesting answer. If you're guaranteed to go 1-1, who would you rather have the win against, Indiana or Purdue?
If I'm guaranteed, I would rather get that win against Purdue, only because I think Brad can outcoach Mike Woodson. I don't think he needs the help. Whereas Purdue is going to be, we know what Purdue is, right? They're going to be a top 3, top 4 at worst team in the conference. And Matt Painter, he's had our number for a while, and he legit is one of the 5, 6, if not higher, best coaches in the country. Whereas Mike Woodson, I think we don't need the guarantee against Mike. We might just be able to beat him in our own merit.
I said Purdue as well. Like, the stats of Brad Underwood winning the most out of any Big Ten coach in the last 5 years, but it just almost feels like Matt Painter is like the professional Big Ten coach. Like, he knows how to win Big Ten games. He knows how to scout his Big Ten coaches, and he is going to be a tough out for any team, anytime in the Big Ten. Whenever he gets to the NCAA tournament, total wash. You never know what's going to happen. Is it going to be a national championship run, or is it going to be, all right, we're out in the first round? Who knows? That's what Matt Painter's all about. In the Big Ten, though, my goodness, he just knows how to win. He knows how to stop Tom Izzo. He knows how to get the best of Peichel at Rutgers. He gets the best of Brad Underwood in Illinois. It is just insane how great he is as a Big Ten coach. Like, I don't know if there's any other, sports analogy that you can, pin to it of him just being so good in conference play, but out of conference play is sometimes where he can struggle.
And if he proves himself this year, a lot of people watching this, are going to, when you have arguably the greatest college basketball player of all time, sure, winning is a lot easier. And I get that point. But if this year Matt Painter, after losing a guy like Zach Edey, can come back and, I'm saying top 3, top 4. Let's be honest. Purdue can very well win this conference. And I think they had the second highest odds, or if not even first, to win the conference. If Purdue wins the conference this year, then Painter really does cement himself, not even as a recent great, but you're talking about an all-time Big Ten coach.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially when you bring UCLA and Mick Cronin into this league, who is the number 22 team in the country, Rutgers with their freshman talent at number 25, Purdue with what they have, and then Indiana at number 17. A lot of new pieces, but Mike Woodson, I don't think he can coach his way out of a paper bag. I have to see it to believe it. There's a lot of talent there. Great job recruiting in the transfer portal. Mike Woodson, but I have to actually see it take hold and have Indiana make an NCAA tournament first before I crown them as any sort of like true contender in the Big Ten. I think this comes down to UCLA, Purdue, and Illinois in this Big Ten. I know there are going to be moments early on where Illinois might lose one of those early games, like the two first. I think that could happen, lose to Wisconsin, something like that. But I just truly think the talent on this Illini roster, Brad Underwood has proven it in the past that he can win. And I think that's a really sexy combination of winning a conference. Not a lot of teams have that. I think it's Illinois and Purdue. I know UCLA will have growing pains going to a new conference, but it feels like basketball that's a lot easier than to just say get five 300 pounders, offensive linemen, USC, do it, just go, be physical. I think it's a lot easier in the Big Ten basketball world to compete immediately in a new conference. So I think those are your three true contenders until Mike Woodson can prove otherwise.
I just think the talent that Mike Woodson brought in, or let's just say, let's be honest here, the NIL of the Hoosiers brought in is just too good to not finish in the top three. When it comes to UCLA, I get it. Like, yeah, they've got a really talented roster themselves, but you've got Mick Cronin and his starting point guard being Sky Clark. And we saw the Sky Clark experience when he was under a guy like Brad Underwood. And I feel like Mick Cronin is arguably a more exaggerated Brad Underwood. So I don't know if that experiment necessarily is going to work. I just think the floor of this Indiana team, just based on just the amount of production, college basketball production, even from previous years that they're bringing back, has them finishing really no lower than maybe four. But I think they're going to be a top three team. I'm trying to think. Illinois might have the highest. No, I think Indiana has the highest ceiling, and Purdue probably has the highest floor. I'm going to give Mike Woodson a little bit more credit just because of the talent he brought in. I agree with you. I don't think he's that good of a coach, but neither was Juwan Howard. And Juwan Howard in Michigan, they ended up winning a conference title here and there. So, I think I'm going to give the Hoosiers a little more credit than you did.
But I still would take Juwan Howard over Mike Woodson as a coach. I really would.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'd go. I think Mike Woodson, he's never had a point guard. He's got a really good guard this year. What's his name? Miles Rice, I think his name is. And again, they've got two bigs who could both be contending for that all Big Ten first team. I don't know. It's just one of those. They're so loaded up with talent that if he doesn't escape, and make it to the Sweet 16 this year, he's gone. He has to be gone. That team is just too talented.
All right, let's go back to our roster. There are a couple interesting cases here of guys that are returning, but we don't necessarily know what their role is on this year's team. You have Dre Gibbs and you have Ty Rodgers coming into the fold this year with a brand new roster and brand new roles. What do you think of those two? Where do you think minutes-wise they're going to be at? Like, I'm really struggling to find how big they impact this team. I know Dre had a really good exhibition against Ole Miss, but it is a fascinating case that they are both still here in Champaign in this new world of college basketball.
I'll start off with Dre. Dre, I think you saw the value that he brings on at that exhibition game against Ole Miss. The guy is super confident. He's brings the energy. He can score, and he's one of the few guys on this team that enjoys playing defense. So I think, I set the expectations for him to take on like that Justin Harmon role from last year's team. Just be that first guard off the bench to spell Kasparis or Kylan, whether, it's just becomes a natural part of the game, or if one of them gets into foul trouble or gets hurt or whatnot. The guy who I'm really interested in seeing is Ty Rodgers. And just on today's episode of Locked On Illini, I talked about this on what I'm really looking forward to seeing in the next couple weeks. We know this Illinois team is deep. It can run 9 or 10 deep. But if you're a good basketball team, it doesn't matter if you have 10 good basketball players. You need to play your top 8. Okay, Number 9 and 10, even if they are talented, it doesn't matter. That means they're taking time away from the two guys ahead of them. So one of the question marks I kind of have is that wing position, because, you mentioned Trey White earlier. We also have Will Riley, who's, one of the most heralded freshmen in the country. And then you have Ty Rodgers, who has played for this team for a couple of years now. He understands the culture. He does everything on a basketball court well, except for, shoot jump shots. But how do you balance those minutes between those three guys? Because again, you can't play everybody, or at least you shouldn't, because all three guys aren't, the equals to each other. So for me, Ty Rodgers is the guy who I'm most looking forward to seeing, just because I can't fathom a world where he doesn't play a substantial role on this basketball team. But if I forget who Ty Rodgers was and I just look at names and stat sheets, box scores from the last couple of years, and like essentially take my bias out, I feel like Ty might be the odd man out here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I was a, let's say, Pittsburgh Panther fan, and I'm just like, hey, let's take a look at the Illini roster. And I was like, oh, cool, they have Ty Rodgers coming back. They have Dre Gibbs. That's their only two returners. But looking at it, like you said, in a box score, Ty Rodgers doesn't really give you much on terms of the box score. He really doesn't. There are moments where he's a great layup machine, but defensively, that's where he can really help you out. And I know those intangibles don't always show up in the immediate box score, but I think Ty is going to be in a situation where if there's a wing or there's a guard that just is blowing by everybody, I think Brad is going to use him as a bulldog and say, all right, Ty, go cover him, shut him down. That's it. Kasparis, you're out of here. We are just going to utilize Ty Rodgers as a defensive guy. And that leads to another problem, though, is that I don't believe you can have Morez Johnson and Ty Rodgers on the court at the same time. And there's plenty of minutes in that front court for Morez Johnson to go out and play unless Kerry Booth just comes out and is just electric right away. So I think that leads to another issue of Ty Rodgers, and that's nothing that he can do about it. It's just two offensive just black holes so far. We'll see what Morez Johnson can develop in offensively, but that really, really hurts Ty Rodgers' playing time, is that you can't have those guys on the court at the same exact time.
Morez Johnson, offensively, at least you can see having a role as like a rim runner. A guy who Kasparis can lob it up to, Colin can lob it up to, after a pick and roll. With Ty, it's just different. It's, again, you're talking about what does Ty do best, and yeah, it's on the defensive side of the court. But Trey White is a pretty decent defender himself. So again, I just don't know what extra stuff that Ty Rodgers is going to bring, that Trey White already doesn't. And then certainly neither of those two have the ceiling that Will Riley does. Will Riley can come in any game, get hot and score 20 plus points and lead the team in scoring. And so Will clearly has his own role. But then the other two, I don't know. It's going to be, I think it's one of the things I'm most looking forward to seeing on this team this year, because when we do the season recap episode here, I can see the season going both ways for Ty Rodgers. This is silly of us. Of course, Ty Rodgers would have a big role on this team. He's the most veteran of the group, and, Brad Underwood really counted on him. But I can also see a scenario where, hey, we kind of hinted at this at the preview episode that, hey, what role is Ty Rodgers going to serve on this team? And ultimately, he's a guy whose minutes, unlike previous years, actually go down.
Yeah, I think a lot of Ty's minutes will be tied to how well these guys become everyday guys, using the Brad Underwood term. Are they buying in on defense? Are they hustling? Are they doing the small things that lead to Illinois winning basketball games? If they do, then Ty Rodgers' big advantage over those guys is done. But if they don't, and there's some attitude issues of hey, why aren't I scoring here? Why aren't I getting the ball and pouting and that turning into some negative things for the Illini, I think Brad will just be like, Ty, be Ty from last year and just do it. And I think that's where Ty Rodgers is going to have to not hope that his teammates are selfish, but I think that's the big way that he's going to make an impact on this team, is being essentially the assistant coach on the basketball court for this Illini team.
It's just going to be interesting because obviously, we all know the deep relationship he has with, Tim Anderson, who's obviously not on this basketball team anymore. So, you wonder if, Now, granted, Brad Underwood's a Ty Rodgers guy. Don't get me wrong, but arguably his biggest backer in that locker room is gone now, and so that's why like the bias is kind of gone. And so, I don't know. I think he's the biggest enigma for me on this upcoming roster because the other guys, have high ceilings, and we're just kind of they're younger, and we're interested in seeing, even if they don't contribute this year, we can foresee big roles next year. But if Ty Rodgers isn't satisfied with his role this year, then he may very well not be an Illini next season.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head who Illinois played in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year, but I think I haven't really talked a lot about Dre, but I think Dre Gibbs is going to have to be that guy this season where it's just going to be like, hey, be that microwave scorer. Be the guy that comes in, shoots a couple threes, and makes them, gets Illinois either back into a game or extends the lead to a point where the other team can't get to Illinois. I think that's going to be what his vibe is going to be. And it's honestly surprising that he's still here in Champaign. Like, he was the guy that I thought immediately would be like, all right, I'm gone, I'm bouncing. And there were moments in the off season where I was waiting for that to happen after all these commits came in. Hey, he's bouncing. Hey, he's bouncing. There's got to be a reason why he stayed, and there's got to be a reason why Brad Underwood and the staff wasn't like, oh, well, you might not get a lot of playing time here. So I think Dre is going to play a bigger part on this team than I initially anticipate. I know I just kind of called him a microwave scorer, but that can mean a lot of minutes in the Big Ten.
And it's not just you, Austin. That's all of us. We all thought Dre was going to be gone this offseason, especially, when he had his family members tweeting the things that they were tweeting during the season last year. But if Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, ends up being one of the better players on this year's team and then plays, a big role on next year's team roster, I really think he can go down as one of the all-time fan favorites when it comes to the Illini, especially because we all know of how do I say this properly? His disdain for Purdue and that program. That's kind of endearing to us. So DGL is one of those guys where I think it's going to be super easy to root for. And if he goes down, if he can like ultimately just take over like that Trent Frazier role, right? Where he doesn't have to be our go-to scorer, but hey, we need you on defense. Bring that energy and supply the scoring whenever you can. I just think all the stories that he has, not necessarily even on the court, can make us all real big fans of his moving forward.
It was a Sunday, and I was watching the Big Ten Tournament Championship at a hotel bar in Indiana, setting up for a athletic directors conference. And I was wearing all my orange gear, and a guy sat next to me, and we started talking. And he ended up being DGL's one of his AAU coaches, and he said, "Get ready for DGL to play at 4 different colleges." I mean, because he played at 5 different high schools, and so far to this day, he's committed to Purdue, dropped them, came to Illinois, and he's still at Illinois. So, I mean, whatever Brad Underwood and those conversations have been internally must have been majorly positive, and it showcases that DGL wants to be a part of this and not just a me guy. He's the anti-Sky Clark right now, and this is a guy that has a lot of talent. This is a guy that probably could start for a lot of Big Ten teams, but yet he is still in Champaign with this team. It's unbelievably wild.
And if we're talking about dark horse, like long shots to lead the team in scoring, if for whatever reason Kylan and Kasparis can't play together, just because they're two more natural on the ball type of guys, and halfway through the season you replace DGL or you replace Kylan with DGL, I think DGL is talented enough of a scorer and aggressive enough where he could be the guy to average 14, 15 points. Again, I don't think he'd be a favorite or even a top 2-3 guy, but he could be a long shot answer for the top scorer on this basketball team if certain events happen.
And again, a guy that we haven't talked a lot about, the guy that's kind of the mystery man for this season, Kerry Booth, the transfer out of Notre Dame. Could play a lot of minutes at that 4, could get his minutes stolen from him from Morez Johnson. But being the son of a NBA GM, being a guy that played really well at Notre Dame at times, had some hot streak moments, can shoot from the 3-point line. this is a guy that could impact the game a lot, but it's not a guy that a lot of Illini fans are like, oh yeah, Kerry Booth. He's going to be a glue guy for this team, and I'm excited to see exactly what he can bring to the Illini roster on a game-to-game basis.
He's one of the other guys next to Ty Rogers, who we talked about earlier, who I'm kind of very interested in seeing what his role is on this team early in the year. At this point, Brad has seen this team up close and personal with practices for a couple of months now. So he knows, he probably has in his mind what kind of role he has for Kerry Booth, but we don't. We have no idea. We're going to see early on, like, as you mentioned, Kerry Booth could be one of the top guys, first guys off the bench when it comes to bigs, or he could just be a guy who kind of loses his minutes to a Morez Johnson, and then all of a sudden we cycle through essentially Avicic, Morez Johnson, and Hummerkaus, and just cycle through those three bigs at those two positions. And Kerry could end up being a guy who only averages 10, 15 minutes a game, if that. And, he's maybe looked on more as a longer timeline piece for Brad next year. So Ty Rogers and Kerry Booth were actually the main focus points of my episode today, about two guys who I really want to see what their roles are very early, because I can see them playing a lot of minutes, but I can also see a scenario where both of them don't play that often.
All right, let's play the ultimate version of ultimate positivity and ultimate negativity. Let's start out with the floor of this Illini team, and why would they not be able to hit the ceiling? So what is your ultimate floor for this team, and why did it happen?
I think the floor of this team is one of the last couple in when it comes to the tournament. I think it's a tournament team regardless. But when you're talking about, chemistry issues, this is a team that hasn't played together before outside just practice. If this team, being so young, if they get off to a really rough start in the out of conference schedule, you're talking about guys who, may have some bad habits develop, some insecurities, or, just they're unsure of themselves. It's not a veteran team where they can kind of pick each other up and be like, hey, we've been down this path before. We can do this. We'll get out of this funk. Unfortunately, with the lottery that you kind of play with Brad Underwood and the way he puts together these rosters, we saw what happened 2 years ago, right? A very talented roster, which just never quite lived up to its billing. This team is younger than that, and it plays a much tougher schedule. So I do think one of the worst case scenario would probably be, just top, 18 teams now. You're talking about maybe 8 or 9 make it. 7 or 8 make it from the Big Ten to the NCAA tournament. So you're talking like maybe top 8, just being the last team in, and you're talking about, out in the first round.
Yeah, I think the floor of this team is not making the NCAA tournament. I truly believe that. I think there's so many new pieces. Yes, there are guys with NCAA experience with Kerry Booth, Kylan Boswell, and Trey White in there, but this is a team where there could be a lot of pick-me moments. There could be a lot of moments where Will Riley's like, hey, I'm just trying to get to the NBA draft right now. Like, I'm not here looking to win games. There could be opportunities where Kasparis is like, hey, I'm going to be the European guy. I'm going to be a Luka Doncic style player. Watch me do my thing. And he's not Luka Doncic. Maybe he's just overvalued in the NBA draft circles. Where Thomas Loff is struggling because of his defensive capabilities. Like, I think there are opportunities where Illinois can really falter and their confidence gets shot really early because of that non-conference slate, especially starting November 28th against Arkansas and then going into Big Ten play. I think there are moments where Brad Underwood might have to just try to soothe his players internally and not be the bad cop. Maybe he just needs to be the ultimate good cop, and I know he hates doing that because that means he knows that his own team is struggling. That means his own team is falling apart at the seams, and that's where that comes into play. He did it a lot 2 years ago in post-game press conferences where he was like, hey, this team is trying. We're doing our best kind of thing, and that's when you know that a Brad Underwood team is struggling mightily. So I think that's my floor. It's just missing out. You'll see them like in the hunt kind of thing, like a lot of Chicago Bears fans see year after year after year. And that's where the Illini might be at the end of this season. And do I think that's going to happen? No, but I think that's the floor of this team. Now, let's get to the positive side of things. What do you think our ceiling is for this Illini basketball team?
I'm curious to know, to go back to our season preview episode last year and wondering what we picked as our floors and ceilings. This year's team, to me, the ceiling is a Sweet 16. Some Illini fans may not like to hear that, especially after making an Elite Eight run last year. But I've said this all off season long. I think the 2025 team next season could win the national championship. Even if Kasparis has a year that we all think that he can have, I think a lot of our talent is just so young and eligible to come back that the following year, when we have a year of playing together and just a year of growing older, we can win the national championship. I just don't know if this year, how many teams are out there that can just have this sort of roster overhaul and be led essentially by arguably our two best scorers this season might be two freshmen. I just think that's a really tall order for a team, and a team that really doesn't has made it pretty known like they're not focusing too much on the defensive side. I think the Sweet 16 right now is our best case scenario.
Yeah, I'm still leaning toward Elite Eight as being the ceiling of this team. I don't think this is a Final Four team. I think there's too much experience out in the world of college basketball. If Illinois goes against UConn or a Kansas or one of those teams that just went so transfer portal heavy with major experience guys, those former five-star players that maybe didn't work out at the first stop, gain some experience, go to Kansas. I think the Elite Eight is what our ceiling is going to be, and I think it's going to be on the backs of Casper's being that lottery pick. It's going to be on the backs of Will Riley being a top 30 NBA draft pick, even so as young as he is. I think Thomas Loft would have to be a second-round pick for this to happen as well, and the ancillary pieces outside of that, like a Ben Hummerkaus, kind of has a Marcus Domask style season, and where Illinois can get back to the Elite Eight. But again, whenever you go up against those teams, experience matters, and I don't think this Illinois team has that experience outside of Kylan Boswell, who's been into some of those battles in the NCAA tournament. Not a lot of these other transfers have, and that's what worries me whenever you get into nut crunching time. 2 minutes left. Who's taking that final shot? What's the situation look like? I don't know if we have an exact answer on what that final 2 minutes of Illini basketball looks like. Last year, it was pretty easy. Terrence Shannon Jr., and then during the suspension, it was Marcus Domask. Those were the two guys, two easy answers. This year, you have some freshmen. But what does that look like in the time when you need a bucket? I don't know. Could it be Dre Gibbs being the guy because he's a veteran guy? Could it be Ben Hummerkaus? I don't know. A lot of question marks to be had whenever there's some tight games that we just don't have answers to, but that's the most exciting part of this is that maybe it's someone the unexpected. That's why they play the games. So tomorrow can't come quick enough for that.
Yeah, I mean, last year we didn't know either, right? I mean, we knew Terrence Shannon Jr., but we didn't know Marcus Domask was going to have the season that he had. So who knows? Like, once the season comes and, gets started and December rolls around, we might see a guy like Ben Hummerkaus, all of a sudden be a legit 15, 17-point scorer every single night. Or maybe, one of your predictions, Trey White, he could have a bigger role than, all of us maybe foresee right now. But that's kind of the fun part of, where we're at right now, right? The basketball season starts Monday night. Right now, it's just all questions in our head, in all our group chats, wondering who's going to play what role. But starting Monday night, Eastern Illinois, we can finally get to see, on the basketball court, which players are ready to step up, and which players we've overrated all off season long, which players we might have underrated all off season long. It's fun. Football's been fun and it's carried us over the last couple of months, but Illinois is a basketball school, and so it's nice to be excited for the hardwood again.
I mean, Illinois football really did its job getting us to the 1 yard line. If you think about it, I mean, they literally almost punched it in 2 basketball seasons. So kudos to Illinois football for at least doing that. It wasn't September when we were trying to have these conversations, but I do think what Illini fans need to realize is that this season's going to have some major ebbs and flows. Like last year, Quincy Guerrier, There were moments where it was like, really? He's that guy that Brad Underwood brought in? Really? Like some major struggles early on in the season. Then the Terrence Shannon Jr. suspension happened, and things opened up for him. He was phenomenal. And then Terrence came back, and he struggled again, even in the NCAA tournament. I think there are going to be times where we got to take 1,000-foot view instead of a 1-foot view on some of these players, because there is going to be some issues where you're like, oh, Thomas Loffa looks awful for 3 games, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he scored 12 points, he scored 15 points, he led the team in rebounds this game, he blocked 3 shots. Like, I think we gotta just remember that after every game that there's going to be some crazy stats, ebbs and flows that this season that we have to just deal with.
I think you're asking Illini fans to be rational,
Yes,
and I think we
that is a
both
much
know
shorter way of what I said, and even myself, I'm not rational.
none of
I
us are.
understand. Yeah,
None of us are. It's very easy to sit here on the season preview episode and say, "Hey, we should all be rational." But like you said, the minute Ben Hummerkaus goes 0 for 4 again in a game that actually matters, people are going to be calling for his benching. Bring in DGL into starting lineup, whatever hot topics. But again, that's the joy of being a part of one of the most passionate fan bases out there.
I can't wait till EIU is up 5 with 15 minutes left in the first half, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?
Oh no!
Drain the season. It's done." But yes, this is an exciting time to be an Illini fan. NIL is juiced up for Illini basketball. Recruiting has been successful for the upcoming seasons as well. The transfer portal has been heating up, and the international market, unexpectedly, a huge factor of what this Illini basketball roster is, and I expect that to continue year after year after year with the connections that Jeff Alexander has made. It's just wild to think of Illinois basketball being in this place, like even more so than what we were with Bill Self. Like we're so much in the national stage and the international stage that people want to come to Illinois basketball. People want to be a part of this, and it's an exciting time, Sonny.
And I've said this before, I think this is a huge year for the Illinois program when it comes to the development of a Kasparis and a Will Riley. A lot of, bringing back a guy like Orlando Antigua means that we're going to be in the conversations with a lot of top 10, top 20, potential one and done NBA type of guys like Jason Long referenced earlier in the chat. And we need to prove that we can develop them. That these guys are very talented pieces. That hey, if you're a top recruit, you can come to Illinois, and we're going to get you developed and turned into a lottery pick. And not only that, we've been very aggressive with a guy like Kasparis, from Europe, Tomislav from Europe. If those guys come to Illinois and they, appreciate the culture, and we want them to have good things to say back home. Right? Like when it comes to domestic battles, in particular recruiting battles, it's hard for kids who grew up around here to look at Illinois the same way they would see a Kansas or a North Carolina or a Duke. But a young kid in Europe, he may not understand what a blue blood in college basketball is. For him, it might just be, the trust of his coach, who also happened to coach Kasparis Jakushonis, who had a fantastic freshman year at Illinois and now is making millions of dollars at the NBA level. Brad Underwood has a lot of pressure on him this year, just based on, those international players' developments alone, especially because, as you mentioned, between Jeff Alexander and Orlando Antigua, a lot of our recruiting and roster building in the near future is going to be built internationally.
Absolutely. And you talk about development, and I think as it pertains to this season as well, Orlando Antigua is back to develop these posts. Curry Booth, Thomas Lafavicic, Morez Johnson. He's going to be back to help these guys. And, I mean, you saw the development of Coleman Hawkins. You saw the development of Kofi Coburn throughout the years. Like, those 4 and 5s for Illinois basketball are in such great hands of Orlando Antigua. Just an unbelievable guy of doing that. He's done it with Karl Anthony Towns at Kentucky. He's done it with Trey Lyles at Kentucky. I mean, the list goes on of guys that he's helped Willie Cauley-Stein add him to the mix. I mean, these guys are going to want to come to Illinois because of the development of Orlando Antigua. That's something you need to work on with the guards now that Tim Anderson's gone. But I realize that. But you have Orlando Antigua with these big guys, and in the Big Ten, the big man still reigns supreme.
And quite honestly, I know the Illini fan base is kind of split up on him, but I, I really appreciate the role that Tyler Underwood had on building our offense last season. And I just think a guy like him and Zach are guys who are very analytically driven, and we know Brad Underwood is open to listening to them. And just the fact that I feel like are always kind of two steps ahead and looking to see what the NBA is doing really well and trying to be the first programs to bring it into the college basketball level. Do I wish Tim Anderson was here? Absolutely. I think if Tim Anderson were still here, we would have the best assistant coaching staff, entire coaching staff in the country. And so we miss having him, in particular to handle the Chicago area. But even with his loss, I really like the guys that we have under Brad. And I know that, next offseason, it's going to be a highly sought after position to be on this staff under this head coach. And, everyone just kind of has their own roles. They accept it, and they're all just very good at it.
And you have the right guy on top of it all, of Brad Underwood. Even more so than Brad Underwood, you have Josh Whitman, who is at the forefront of Illini and NCAA athletics, and is not going to let won't let Illinois fall behind, which is just a valuable asset to have. He's going to be in charge of this new world order of college sports with revenue sharing and the like. So I think Illinois athletics as a whole is in amazing hands, and we've talked about that a lot, Sonny, on this podcast of Josh Whitman's role for the Illini. But Sonny, tomorrow it all starts, and so what we talked about the high, we talked about the low. What is your official Illinois basketball projection of where they land in the NCAA tournament in terms of the final round they play in and their placing in the Big Ten?
I think we're not going bold prediction. We're just going to go prediction. Yeah. I'll say I'm just gonna do my whatever. We finished second in the conference, but my bold prediction, by the way, spoiler alert for you guys who watch Locked On Illini, I'm going to release this later on this week, is that we're actually going to go 0-4 when it comes to the big out of conference matchups that we have this upcoming, in the next couple months. When it comes to Arkansas, Alabama, and a couple of the other teams, I don't think we're going to win any of them. I think a lot of Illini fans are going to be ready to jump ship. But I think that the season serves its purpose, and Underwood has built this out-of-conference schedule for a reason. And I think that the team really takes a step up when the actual Big Ten season starts. And we're going to finish second in the conference, whether that's to Indiana or Purdue. I don't quite know. Unfortunately, I don't think we survive the first weekend of March Madness. I think we'll win our first game, but I just think the team is too young this year to make it to the Sweet 16.
I have a similar prediction. I have Illinois finishing third in the Big Ten to UCLA and Purdue, and I think that Illinois will lose in the Sweet 16 to a Kansas or something just because of the seeding situation. I think they lose to a number one seed in the NCAA tournament in the Sweet 16. And I think that's going to be a pretty successful year, especially with Kasparis getting drafted in the lottery. I think that will happen, and that will absolutely transform Illini recruiting internationally, just because you have a one-and-done talent like him in your midst, and then Will Riley will also get drafted. So I think that will help out with some more one-and-dones, and then, like you said, that next season should be absolutely stellar. So number 6, Sweet 16, and third in the conference for the Fighting Illini. But that's why they play the games. Like I said, number 1 game takes place tomorrow against Eastern Illinois. You can catch that game on Big Ten Network Plus, 7 p.m. start time for the Illini against the Eastern Illinois Panthers. College basketball begins tomorrow. Catch it all on various networks. It should be a fun time now that we've got the orange basketball dribbling around. So, Sonny, Thank you so much. This has been a great ride to preview this Illini basketball team, and we'll see who's right at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's just it's fun. This is technically season number 2 for us now.
Hmm.
When it comes to football and basketball, and so we're continuing to grow with your support. So if you're watching this, if you're not subscribed already, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you guys anything, but it really does help this channel grow. And we really want to hit 1,000. We're so close at this point. So help us out if you can. Share it with your old roommates back in Champaign, or friends or family who may have gone to Illinois. But appreciate all of you, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys every week.
Yeah, we'll be trying some new things this season, maybe some different style of shows. We'll figure something out between Sonny and I and the rest of the Armchair Illini Network. So be on the lookout for that. And again, this has been the Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network. Like, share, subscribe, post on Facebook about this, and call us idiots on Facebook. It drives engagement, I'm sure. So please like, share, subscribe, and once again, ILL.
I and I.